I would really appreciate if you could make a video on loneliness, particularly among men. I'm a man in my early 20s and desire a meaningful relationship. That's all I really want, but I don't want to look around on dating sites or force it to happen by actively searching for it. I've had one partner before who came naturally without me looking for her. How do I know if that same happiness will find me again? I feel lonely on a daily basis. I remain healthy, mentally strong, and the Ascended Master teachings, with the Ascended Master teachings, but I can't help but have a deep desire for a loving relationship with the opposite sex. Yet when I look at the general human being, they are also filled with toxicity, mainstream ideas, and low-level interaction with no real meaning. I sometimes have no hope and feel like giving up, but since I'm still young, I don't want to be like that. You're my only hope on this as I listen to the Ascended Masters and take their wording seriously. Okay, well, I'm a little concerned about you saying I'm your only hope because that's not really the case. So what I would say, first of all, is that if you're still young, or even if you're not young, no matter what age you are, there's always the possibility of another relationship. And if you have experienced that one relationship came to you naturally, why would you doubt that this could happen again? I mean, seriously, why would you doubt this? And personally, as I've said, I've been on the spiritual path for a long time, and I have been married and divorced 3 times, and now I'm married for the 4th time. And in each of these relationships, they all came to me, as you say, naturally. But the reason they came to me was that I was engaged in a spiritual movement. I was participating in a spiritual movement. And in that spiritual movement, I met other people that were spiritual. So they didn't have the mainstream normal state of consciousness. I haven't had a relationship with a woman who was not in a spiritual teaching. And so I would recommend the same thing. You know, it doesn't have to be an Ascended Master organization. Wherever you live, look at the spiritual movements that are there and participate in them. You don't have to have the idea that you are there to convert other people to Ascended Master teachings. You just participate at the level whatever these organizations do. And then see if you meet somebody. You don't need to do it with the, as you said, with the intention. But see, when you're talking about meeting somebody naturally, number one, you can't have the intention that you want to meet somebody, no. But you also can't have the intention that, oh, I'm probably not going to meet somebody. It's never going to happen again. You have to be neutral. You have to go into that neutral state of mind where you're open for it. The other thing I would say is that one of the things we often don't do, even though we're on the spiritual path, is we often don't sit down and say, okay, what kind of relationship do I actually want and what don't I want? So I think it can be valuable if you are in this situation you are in now to do that. Now, basically, I would say, based on the question, it sounds like you feel stuck. You want a relationship, but it's not, hasn't happened so far. And I would say in those situations when you feel stuck, you always have to look at yourself, your attitude, your approach. What could I change? How am I locked? What is it that puts me in this catch-22? And you'll often find that one of the reasons is that you actually sensed, based on your previous relationships, there are certain things you want and don't want, but you haven't clarified it in your mind. So therefore, you're keeping, subconsciously, you're keeping yourself in this, where you don't want just any relationship, but you haven't really clarified what kind of relationship you want. And just my own situation, my first 3 marriages, after my 3rd divorce, I had some time where I didn't have a relationship for a year and a half, and I processed it. And I used that to look at myself, look at my patterns and say, and I started to see that there were certain patterns in how I looked at my first 3 relationships. And after I processed this, I came to the point where I realized that I had a choice to make. Now, I could easily attract another relationship that had the same dynamic as the first 3. And I realized I could keep doing this for the rest of my life. Or I could look at myself and say, is this what I really want? And what I realized was that because of what I've said about the avatar videos, I always felt I was here to help other people. I realized that in my relationships, I had this prince on a white horse syndrome. I felt that I didn't really have a relationship based on me and what I wanted. I was there to help other people. So I attracted women that I thought I was meant to help. I'm not saying they saw it that way, but that was how I saw it in my mind. And I realized that I was, in a sense, saying, I can't allow myself to say, what do I want in a relationship? Because it should be whatever way I can help other people. And I came to a point where I realized, that's just, why am I doing this? I mean, why am I doing this? It's just silly. And I don't want to do this anymore, I realized. And so I looked at this and I said, okay, who am I? What kind of person am I? What kind of a relationship would I want? And based on this, I met my fourth wife, and the dynamic is very different than from the first three. So again, I think it could be helpful for you to do the same thing and clarify, what kind of relationship do I want? And then you also need to look at yourself, in order to have that relationship, what I need to overcome in my own psychology. I mean, I had to overcome this prince on a white horse syndrome, which was part of this process I talked about in my last avatar video on avatars and relationships. Letting go of this desire to help other people or change other people. And so these are really what comes to me. But I also think that as an avatar, we have a certain existential loneliness because we feel that we don't fit in on planet Earth. We're not like most people on Earth who are just focused on their daily lives and worldly things and pleasures and this and that. We just can't engage in that the same way other people do. We can't see that sex or money or career is the goal of life. It's just not the goal of life for us. So we need to, if we want to have good relationships that are meaningful to us, we need to find preferably other avatars, or at least other spiritually interested people. But you only do that by engaging in, a spiritual movement, getting out among other people. And of course, you also, as an avatar, the loneliness is partly come by this dynamic we have that I've described in the avatar videos. So watch those avatar videos, see how that applies to you, and how you might have, as a result of coming to Earth and receiving this birth trauma, you might have a very deep subconscious belief where you might actually resist having a close relationship with people because you're afraid to get hurt. And this is something that really can, for avatars, can come from that we have had relationships with fallen beings in past lifetimes or even in this lifetime. We have been deeply hurt by this. And this is something I'll talk about in a coming video on avatars. The previous part of this answer was recorded a few days ago, but I realized there is an important thing to say about loneliness. Because as spiritual people, we can't look at loneliness the same way as non-spiritual people do. Because we are aware that there's a spiritual side to life. And this means that we have a higher self. As I have said in many of my videos, this is the whole essence of the spiritual path, is to come to realize that we have a higher self beyond the material world. And what happened was that at some point in the past, as I've explained, we went below the 48th level of consciousness, went into this illusion that we are separate beings. And we felt it as a sense of loss. And we now created these separate selves, these subconscious selves that are meant to deal with that sense of loss. And it's important to understand that these subconscious selves, or what many people call the ego, they have an existential loneliness. They can never escape loneliness because if you are a separate being, you will be lonely, right? You cannot be connected and separate at the same time. And the only way to avoid loneliness is through connection. That's why people think that having a relationship can help them overcome loneliness. But what I'm saying here is that the fundamental loneliness, the existential loneliness that we have, It's that we long back for the connection to our higher selves and to the ascended masters, our spiritual teachers. And nothing on earth, no person on earth can fill that need. There's no substitute here. And this is what unfortunately happens to a lot of spiritual people, because we grow up with these Hollywood fantasies that if you just find the right partner, it will be happily ever after. And this is putting a completely unrealistic and unreasonable demand and expectation on another person. Because if you think that another human being can fill your need to overcome loneliness, you are setting yourself up and the other person up for disappointment. It just can't happen. So as a spiritual person, you need to always be aware that the main goal of your spiritual growth is to reestablish your connection and expand your connection to your higher self and to the ascended masters. And this doesn't mean you can't have a relationship, and it can be fulfilling to have a relationship, obviously. But I'm just saying it's one thing to have a relationship where you allow the other person to be him or herself, and you are allowing you to be yourself, and you're not creating this fantasy picture that this person should help you overcome loneliness. Because overcoming loneliness is an inner process that is only between you, the conscious you, and your higher self. So if you have that dynamic in mind, and I have given a breakthrough video to talk about no self or higher self, where I talk about this, your higher self. And of course, many of my other videos are also meant to help you overcome that loneliness and reestablish your connection. So if you keep that in mind, you can be much more successful in your relationships and avoid this very dysfunctional dynamic that here you have two people that are both expecting something from the other, but what they are expecting is completely unrealistic and the other person can never fulfill it. So both people are bound to become disappointed. And that's a good thing to avoid. And certainly as you move higher on the path and begin to establish that connection with your higher self, this deeper existential loneliness will fade away. Doesn't mean you still can't enjoy having a relationship with another person, but it's just there's not the tension there that you are demanding the impossible from your partner and even from yourself.